Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
Hello, all you cool cats and kittens. Oh, wait. This isn't a tiger podcast. This is BIM Thoughts. We tricked you. Ha ha. This is Bill. We also have Dana DeFilippi and Carl the Storms himself. We're so proud of Carl. He's a great guy. He edits this thing. He's taking care of it all. He's the man when it comes to BIM Thoughts. We also have Richard and Sash with us from Ideate Software. I think you've been on the show before, Richard, haven't you?
I'm not sure if I have on the BIM Thoughts.
Uh-huh.
If I had, it's been a while and I don't remember.
It has been a while. Well, Sash, define yourself.
Wow. All right. Hey, thanks, Bill. So this is Sash Kazminejad, and I've been with Ideate Incorporated now for actually 7 years. My background's in architecture, and I have my California architectural license. And I came to Ideate 7 years ago to start off really as doing training of software and for the Autodesk products. And then, as we kind of migrated forward and did our focus on the Ideate software platform, I moved over full time to the Ideate software side of things, doing the customer success side. So a lot of presentations, blog posts, working with customers, workshops, and so forth. And it's been a great experience. And it's hard to believe that it's been 7 years already since I've come over to Ideate.
7 years already.
Yeah, time goes so quickly.
Yeah. Richard, what have you been doing lately?
Well, I just found out that I'm almost the age of Dana's father, which really makes me upset.
Oh, you're really old then.
Yeah, I am. I'm so old. I've forgotten more stuff than probably Dana even knows right now.
I doubt that. I've learned a lot from Richard over the years.
Yeah. I'm sure we'll never know if he's forgotten.
Yeah, I won't know that either. So my background is architecture, and I've worked at a number of different companies, software companies like Intergraph that doesn't, well, I think they still exist. But in a different realm. Yeah. And Bentley Systems.
Yeah, Bentley.
Well,
didn't Bentley buy Intergraph?
I don't think so. I think now Intergraph is doing mostly like plant design and petrochemical, and they've got some very specific sort of workflow focus on their products. But definitely Bentley was an offshoot of Intergraph as a company. And I worked for Bentley for a number of years. And then the story is always interesting because I went to an architecture firm doing some training for MicroStation in Boston, and that's where I'm based. And someone asked me if I'd ever heard of this new software from this company called Charles River Software. And they just changed their name to Revit Technology. And I had never heard of it. It was new. So I went to the website. The website basically was download this white paper on BIM. Or it wasn't even BIM. I think it was called Parametric Change Engine at the time. And download a white paper on this parametric change engine. And that was it. So I filled out the information. And like the next day I got a call saying, would you come talk to us?
Wow.
And so I thought, well, it was in my backyard. Why not? And so I went over to this Charles River Software company that became later Revit Technology. And I saw a demo of I guess it was actually pre-released software for Revit. So it was before the first version. And I thought to myself, wow, this is what we've been talking about in architecture for years. The fact that, you can make a change in an elevation view and it changes and updates the plan. I mean, we kind of take it for granted now, but it was pretty, groundbreaking 20 years ago. The fact that it's updating all of the views and you change it in the schedule and it's changing on the plans and 3D views and so forth. Because prior to that, the software from both Autodesk and Bentley was you sort of build a model and then you extract a lot of the drawings out of it. You'd extract 2D drawings, and it was quite a process. So anyway, I was pretty impressed by what I saw, even though it was very much in its infancy, and the rest is history, I guess, as they say. I accepted the position and I worked for their Revit technology for a couple of years, and then was purchased by this company that I'm sure everyone knows called Autodesk.
Mhm.
So worked at Autodesk in various roles for about 12 years. And so some of you may know me from those different roles in technical sales and customer success. And then finally coming over to the product management team, and working well, with a whole team of people basically there. And then came over to Ideate Software about 5 years ago.
Mm.
And so, but I'm still based in the Boston area. Haven't moved, and so that's sort of my background, I guess, in a long-winded story.
Wow, you really did define yourself.
I can go back way further too.
Oh,
So, but what's scary is that's 20 years with Revit, because I
yeah.
started at Revit in February of 2000.
You know, what's interesting now is Revit is older than AutoCAD was when Revit started, when Autodesk bought Revit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, one of the things, I worked in technical sales, so, doing presentations. And one of the things that we would say is, oh, AutoCAD is 20-year-old technology.
Yeah.
You don't want to be using that. Here's the newest technology with this parametric change engine that became, BIM and building information modeling.
Right.
So it is kind of ironic that now we're to that point where we were 20 years ago.
I know. What's coming out next, do you think?
That's a really good question. I think all of these sort of the scripting and the computational design is
Mhm.
really hot right now, and I think that it's kind of morphed into a lot of different pieces, and not one software, but lots of this whole huge ecosystem
Mhm.
as architects and engineers are
Hmm.
designing. So I guess the question is, I don't see a silver bullet, like a brand new piece of software
Yeah.
coming out immediately. I could be wrong, or I shouldn't say immediately, but let's say in the near term. But I see lots of different pieces of software kind of collectively evolving the ecosystem.
Right. Right. So we can look at.
We were actually joking here a few weeks ago on this very podcast that Ideate is probably pretty responsible for a lot of people not learning computation or Dynamo as early as they should have, because your tools are so awesome and they do so many things that maybe we would have looked to Dynamo for if we hadn't had them.
Mhm.
Correct. Well, and when I say computational, I mean more of like, we used to do this presentation back in Autodesk that Anthony Hauk, who
Mhm.
I know he's been on this podcast before. I really loved the presentation because it was called choices, not guesses.
Mm.
And the idea that the software was giving you the ability to make intelligent choices, not guesses about, well, I think this is okay. I think this might work. And I think, when it comes to computational, the idea of like, oh, you've got all these spaces, let's say for a hospital or a medical facility, as an example, and they have to be in a certain, like, all the operating rooms have to have a certain support rooms, or let's say support services around them. And so you're kind of creating all these rules, right? You're saying this needs to be near this needs to be near this, like adjacency, but then you're also giving all these other parameters, and you're letting the software kind of figure out things. And I think over in the mechanical world, where people have been designing airplanes, like supersonic planes, and really complicated systems like that, they do a better job of that than we have on the I think the architecture, engineering, and construction side. But I think we're starting to do more of that. And so that's what I mean when I say computational, is just giving us some of the more the ability to make intelligent decisions without just guessing that we think it's going to be okay.
And that seems like that's kind of where this whole, computational design, and we see this now in Revit, especially with the 2021 version out. I think you could see this is kind of where the industry is really going to start, heading. And this is where you can start putting in your inputs, and you can get a various amount of outputs and choices to pick from, and based on your criteria. And it's pretty exciting to see kind of where this is all going to end
It's
up
going to be
going.
exciting to see where it ends up. I wonder if How many people are going to pick it up, though, in the current phase that it is today? Sort of like Dynamo, where when Dynamo first came out, everyone was all excited, but as soon as they got back to their office or whatever, and then they forgot how to use it, or it became difficult. And I wonder if when the competition, the computational, if I could say it right, but I probably won't, design or the generative design is going to get to that point that either Dynamo is now or that the third parties are building on top of it.
Well, and I think that's a good point in the sense, like what Dana was mentioning is, Dynamo came out and was able to do some scripting, and it was kind of like it reminds me of like what Autolisp used to be. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, at a very basic level. And that's where a lot of these third-party solutions, such as Ideate Software, I think fit in very nicely and said, you know what, you don't need to do all those complicated things. We have software that does that for you and makes your workflow so much easier and better. So I think on this sort of computational generative design, I think, as you said, initially it's kind of complex, but there may be some third party software companies that start to develop tools that are a little bit easier to use and integrate
Mm-hmm.
better.
Absolutely.
That's again, my prediction. If you were talking about, sort of where the industry is
Right,
heading.
right.
And I think, it gets also back to what I was saying about an ecosystem where I think, let's say 10 years ago, you know, Revit was very monolithic. It was like you're using Revit or you're using AutoCAD, and that was the only tool that you used. Or, maybe obviously you're using a printer and some other devices and so forth, but it was like this is the my design tool. Or maybe even, we'd see like people using SketchUp as an example. That was their upfront design tool, but then they'd start recreating everything in Revit when they had to go to more of a design development, construction drawings. And I think over the years, like I said, it's morphed into this sort of ecosystem where there's lots of pieces of software that plug into this whole ecosystem. That's Revit, that's building information modeling. As you know, with our Ideate software tools, we're extending that ecosystem to Excel by being able to use a lot of our solutions with Excel and other programs. And so just the fact of not only Revit, but these third party tools, I think are so useful in expanding that
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem.
So what's new with Ideate?
Well, I just mentioned the fact that we, expand our ecosystem
Mm-hmm.
with Excel, but Sash, are there a couple other maybe software programs that you might think about that we could use as well as Excel?
Yes, as a matter of fact, Richard, I think we may have something for everybody. So, as Richard mentioned earlier, we had just published updates to all of our products, and so we typically try to publish at least a couple of point releases a year, usually like a fall and a spring update. And so we just did that. I think Sticky just came out last week or the week before, so it's the freshest one that's on our website. And so Sticky was probably the one that I was most excited about because it went through a major overhaul. And so based on feature requests from a lot of customers, we now actually support the use of Word, PDF, and also Excel as images. And so, prior versions of Sticky, prior to this May 2020 release, Sticky was only able to be brought in through Excel as a schedule. So any sort of work that you did in your Excel files, those get linked into Revit, into Sticky, and get placed into your schedules, kind of in the schedule header area. And for the most part, that's worked out really well for a lot of people because most people that are using Sticky do not have really complicated Excel files with a bunch of graphics or special pie charts or arrows or whatnot. And so anything like that works really well. But we've had also a lot of people say, hey, I have these Word documents, I have these specifications, or I have these code checklists that I need to actually bring in into my Revit files, and converting that stuff to Excel is just going to be a headache. And so we went ahead and started talking about ideas and how we could actually implement the
Hmm.
Word files. And the tricky part about any of that is, Word has a lot more formatting options than Excel. And so, actually trying to, let's say, bring in Word in, let's say, a traditional sticky manner through like the header of a schedule could actually be very complicated, just because of all those formatting options. And as you are probably aware, if you ever gone into a header of a schedule and started playing around with some of the text in there and trying to change some of the fonts, let's say underline part of a word and all that, it's very, very, very limited. The Revit text is not the same as Excel or Word. And so what we ended up doing was we put it out there to the audience and said, hey, what if we did this thing as images? And if we did this thing right, and if we could keep the file sizes to a minimum, if the visual fidelity can work really well, would you be open to that? And we actually had a overwhelmingly positive response to that. And so we started putting together this version of Sticky to support Word files to start with. And so Ben Bischoff in our office, he's the one that's kind of taken on most of the Sticky work, started doing this testing, and we had these very early versions of it. And it was really impressive. I was getting really excited to see these Word files come in at literally a 100% exact match to how it looks in the Word file. Yeah, and so through our beta testing program, which we spent a lot of time with our beta testers on, we got a lot of great feedback, feature requests, and we went to work and made it work out. And in addition to that, we said, well, let's go ahead and support Excel files and also PDFs. And so that's what we've gone ahead and done. So now we give customers kind of two options for how they want to bring in their files. So you still have the traditional Sticky, which is just Excel as a schedule. And then if you need to do Word or you want to do Excel and PDF also as kind of images, we have those options as well. And again, we create live links back to the source. We support both absolute and relative and BIM 360 pathing, which is really helpful. So for everybody that's using BIM 360, which with this whole COVID-19 situation and everybody working from home now, I think the usage of BIM 360 has gone up quite a bit. We have those opportunities to allow people to put their stickies up on BIM 360 and live link through BIM 360, which has been really great. And again, if you look at the visual fidelity of these things, especially when you bring them as images, they look great and they print really well. And so if your Excel files, let's say they have a chart in there, which is like an Excel feature instead of an image, that comes in no problem through linking it as an image file. And then, Word files that have, say, watermarks. If you have a draft, we all use those watermarks. Those come in exactly as they look in the Word file. So it's all about getting your page setups the way you want them in your files, and we'll honor those when you bring them in.
A question for either Bill or Dana is, do you think everyone moves to Revit 2021 right away?
No.
Yeah, that's a softball question. So I think from our experience, it's usually a year or 2 years behind the adoption, or they wait for at least the first point release before upgrading. So a lot of times it's the fall. So the reason I say that is because if you're familiar with Revit 2021, and I know that you've done several presentations on that and what's new, is that they have the ability to link or to update image files, right? So that you can have an image within Revit 2021, and then you can update that from the Manage Images dialog. And so that's only available in 2021, not in prior releases. But what we've done, where Sash is talking about like being able to update the image, that goes back to 2018, 19, and 20, as well as 2021. So I think that's a big sort of differentiation in what we're doing here with this technology.
Absolutely. So on that or that Excel file or the PDF or the Word file, importing that in, do you also have an easy way to update it if the Word file changes?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. So, like we'll call it the traditional Sticky that we've since day one, we have a couple of ways of doing these updates. So for both the images and the Excel schedules, so you can enable auto update, and the way that works is upon the file opening, and actually what we do is when you open up your Revit files, we kind of let Revit do its main loading and whatever processes it needs to do, and then kind of after all that's done, then Sticky checks for updates. and it will flash a little icon on the screen saying, things have been updated. And so we don't want to interrupt any sort of loading process. So that's one of the ways to do the updates. The other one is you can always launch the sticky dialog box and select your sticky or stickies, and then hit the update button. And so, anytime you go into, let's say, the Word file or PDF or Excel file and make a change and hit the save button, when you go back to sticky and open the dialog box, it does a check to see if there's a difference in the times. And if it sees that there are, it will say out of date. And then you can select it and do the update. And we also have the opportunity to do an update from. That way you don't have to remove your stickies and redo them if you decided to move a location or change a file. You have the opportunity to also do an update from as well.
And that always gets tricky. I was doing a presentation, and I say tricky for me, and this goes back to my age again, right? I'm going to keep joking about the age thing here, is that I have now samples directories in multiple different locations, depending on sometimes if I'm doing a particular presentation for a customer. So yesterday, I pointed to a samples directory and I linked in a Word document like Sash was referring to. And then I went and made a change, but I made the change to a different samples directory, if that makes sense, right? So the same document, but in a completely different location. Sure. And then I was looking at ID8 Sticky and I'm like, it doesn't say out of date. It's saying it's up to date, and I'm sitting there looking at it like, what's going on? Finally, I brought up the update from, as Sash was mentioning, and I realized that my path was completely different than what I thought. Mm-hmm. So that's always funny. There's like, you can point to different locations, and especially if directories are named the same things when you're doing in presentations and so forth, it can be, you got to make sure you're looking at the right thing when you make the change.
Absolutely. Do you have a way to launch your applications from within Dynamo?
That is a good question. Sash, do you have...
So, yeah, at this time, I'm not aware of, I'm sure, somebody that does the Dynamo graphs could possibly have a way to launch the applications through Dynamo, but actively we don't really interact with Dynamo. We've had people ask us questions about, having, let's say, some Bimlink functionality within Dynamo, which I think would be, it'd be kind of fun to do some of that. So those discussions have certainly happened. But in terms of launching the applications through Dynamo, not at this time, unless somebody wants to write something that says, hey, I'm going to make a call to Bimlink and launch it.
Yeah, because we use the Clarity server stuff, and it would be neat if we could automate some of those things to run nightly.
Well,
do you use Clarity to automate your Dynamo scripts, Bill?
Clarity can run a Dynamo script, yes.
Do you do that?
We now have a person that does that, and I help them get it running.
Alexi.
Yeah.
Yes, he's great.
He is great.
How would you guys say, especially speaking to how Autodesk has really kind of throwing generative design in the Manage tab, they've responded to kind of what's happening in the industry. How would you guys say that you guys go out to architecture firms, engineering firms, and kind of see what's going on, what people need? How do you understand what's next? What are some things that ID8's looking at right now?
Well, that's a great question. I think, and actually Sash sort of mentioned it before, is we have a beta group, and it's a pretty robust group of individuals that are using our software that span architecture, engineering, construction, MEP, structure. And we are constantly, I should say constantly, but we're quite a bit, doing surveys, asking them, what do they think should be on the horizon? What type of tools should we be developing? I know somewhat similar is Sash did a survey, was it about 6 months ago, Sash, where you were talking about the return on investment. And that was a little bit different because that wasn't forward looking. It was sort of like looking back as, okay, you're using these ID8 software tools. how are they saving you time and money, and how are you benefiting from them, right? But that was something we did with our beta group, and I think that was really well received. But we're doing the same kind of things where it's forward looking too, where we say, what do you think Ideate Software should be focusing on, or what type of things are you dealing with or having troubles with a particular workflow that maybe we can assist, and of course, you're there, we can't always solve every problem that's out there, but it's interesting to see, where people are sort of asking for things, basically.
Yeah, and I think, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier with, let's say, generative design, and while it's there, I think it'll take a little bit of time for people to kind of pick it up. And, sometimes people pick it up when somebody really picks it up and plays around with it and starts doing some posting. And, maybe they do a presentation on it, say at Built or Autodesk University, and they kind of generate a little more excitement, and then more people pick it up, and, kind of spreads like wildfire. And I suspect that maybe as, let's say, this generative design thing kind of picks up more, we may get more people asking questions or features, from us. And we're always listening. And, our website, as an example, you can log a feature request, through a website. When we do our live webinars, we always take questions and ask people to leave us feedback, and also, questions on our existing products, but also if they have ideas for future products. So our doors are always open to answer questions, and also look at what people are looking forward to and what people need help with. And for now, especially, I think since all of us either right now do or have done production work, it seems like that the whole data editing, data management thing is still really big in our industry, and that's been kind of a big focus for us. And that's why we kind of have the products that we have, is because they really are kind of wide and all encompassing, and really help people, really become really productive with their day-to-day
And here's a fun fact: I'm so old, I never used AutoCAD in production. But actually, I was always a MicroStation guy. Yeah, I never touched AutoCAD
used either.
You've never used DeadCAD?
I've only used Revit.
Wow, that's impressive.
I've actually
Really?
not gotten jobs, in particular consulting jobs, because I don't know AutoCAD.
Really?
That was a few years ago.
Wow, that's
They're
amazing.
lost totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I don't want this job if I have to know AutoCAD.
I secretly still have a crush on AutoCAD.
Well, back in the day, and I can say this, I worked for RTKL, and they had Intergraph, which was IGDS, the Interactive Graphics Design System. That IGDS became the basis for MicroStation. So when I went to a couple other firms in Boston, I ended up using MicroStation. So I was always a MicroStation kind of guy. And then I went directly to work for Intergraph. So that's why I never had the opportunity really to use AutoCAD in production.
Did they have EcoSim at that time? Could you model 3D in Bentley tools?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's actually a really cool, fun fact, I think, about Bentley, is that they were doing BIM before AutoCAD, or before Revit. Yeah.
Well, but at the like what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast, though, I worked on even before EcoSim, it was called Triforma, and it was a 3D modeling system in Bentley. But what you did is you built the 3D model, and then you extracted all the 2D elevations, you extracted the plans. So what happened is, let's just say you were making a change to the model. You'd make a change to the model, and then you'd run this whole extraction process. It was almost like a PDF printing process, right? Where you'd extract all the 2D drawings. So the 2D drawings were never linked or never live. It was, you'd make a modeling change, and then you'd have to re-extract every single time to make sure that the 2D drawings reflected the changes that you just made to the 3D model. So I wouldn't call it BIM. I'd call it maybe half BIM.
It's the early days, right?
Yeah.
It's that step before. We always have to have that.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and I know that within the last few years at the conferences, one thing that's been really popular is model health. And that's something that I definitely want to mention is Richard. You can definitely find Richard Taylor presentations at most conferences. So check it out. Really, really wonderful information. I've definitely learned a lot from him.
Well, thank you. In fact, I just did a model health presentation today as well, as a matter of fact.
Oh, well, and that's what I was going to say is it looks like in the May release, you guys actually have some tools for some health checks.
That's correct. So with IDA BIMLink, our latest release that we delivered in May, we have we've always had hundreds of library links that are predefined sort of links like schedules that you're able to extract to Excel to modify or manipulate that data.
Huge
So
fan of the revision one.
yeah, yeah. So we've added a whole folder for health check. And we've actually, with our samples, we've included a health check spreadsheet, an Excel file. And what you can do is you can extract all of that information to this file. And then there's some macros and some pivot tables in this Excel file that we deliver as part of the software that will update and give you like an overview. So the overview tells you like how many in-place families you have, as an example, and what they are, what work sets are being used. Do you have items that have been mirrored or flipped? I'm trying to think of, so it's showing you all the the categories used very quickly as far as like elements on specific categories and so forth. So it's giving you a really nice snapshot. It's giving you warnings. So all of that information is then can be exported out to that.
Even it looks like sync with Central Times, which is pretty
Yes. Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. It's good. You must be looking at it. I'm doing all this
I
from
am.
memory right now. I'm just thinking, okay, I was just looking at the spreadsheet earlier today. So very
Absolutely.
good.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure just like most of your other libraries and your other schedules within those libraries, they can be edited, right? So the
Absolutely.
user can go in there, they can add different things, remove different things, and create a really consistent Revit model health log for their projects, which I think is really fantastic and so important to be able to visualize that data on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and like you said, you're able to customize it to your particular needs, which I think is excellent. And that the sample that we give you, that health check Excel file, really is a sample. It's like this is what could be done, or if you want to just dump it out and don't change anything, that's great. But obviously, each firm is going to want to modify that to meet their particular standards and needs.
And with that said, too, one of the things that I always try to remind people, because I think sometimes people think of BIMLink as hey, it's just a product to take some information out to Excel to edit and bring back in. But as Richard was just talking about here, we give people some templates to start with, and so it's really about data extraction and not just kind of the standard Revit data that you see, but we actually give people access to a lot of other bits and pieces of data that you normally would never find in a Revit model. Like the one that I always like to demonstrate or talk to people about is like the elevation orientation. Like for example, renaming interior elevations, we can actually get the orientation of the elevation tag, and you can say, oh, between let's say -30 and 30 degrees, that's going to be north, and east and south and west, and you can use that information then to rename your interior elevations. And in that same line, taking that information out and saying, okay, I just want to use this information that BIMLink extracted and build a summary report. And we have a lot of customers that are building really awesome pivot tables, and it just reads the raw data that gets output or exported from BIMLink to Excel. Or we have people that write macros, which you can really get into Excel with the macros and kind of take that data and do whatever else you need to do with it to give you a summary report. And so that's the great thing about BIMLink is just the huge amounts and the volumes of data that we have access to.
Yeah, I definitely have always said that I will never create any Dynamo scripts that involve revisions because you guys do it so great, right? You guys can look at the previous revisions rather than just the current one, and you can schedule that out as a user. It's very intuitive. So absolutely, I find that if there is a tool, especially within Ideate, that can do something, I'm not gonna create a computational workflow for it if I don't have to.
Right. Well, why recreate the wheel? And so we talk about that all the time, is that there are so many workflows that we have out there. And sometimes Sash and I will joke about it. We see all the social media, right? Twitter, LinkedIn, not so much Facebook, but definitely Twitter and LinkedIn. There are a lot of people that are posting things, and they're posting these like incredible Dynamo scripts. And we're thinking, well, we do that in like 2 seconds. Like, why are you
Right.
doing all this?
It's
And so it's,
really, really wonderful, easy, intuitive atmosphere.
yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And that's why we have our, live webinars, we have our classes, and then also our in product and website help to, kind of guide people, to help them understand, how the product works. And so we've been doing a lot more, blogging lately and trying to help people with real specific workflows. And that's really
I'll say
helped
that's
out quite a
also
bit.
something that as a, basically somebody for the firm that teaches someone how to use products, right? That's basically my job, is to teach people how to use and click and, navigate. I always reference your videos on your website. I will never create an ideate reference of any kind because your content is so great. And once again, why create the wheel?
Thank you.
I can't even tell you how many times I've been around the world to different companies, and it's like, hey, I know you. It's like, I've heard you. And that always makes me feel good, because it's like, oh yeah, you've heard me talking about a particular video or workflow or something. So there are, and I think it's not out of realm to say there are hundreds of videos that we have up on our website for different workflows. And we try to look at those and just say, like, well, what are people asking for, and try to do a quick video to show them how to do it really easy.
All right, now for something completely different. We've we've touched on it a couple times throughout the course of the conversation that we've been going on here. Talked about how we all run into Sash and Richard at different conferences around the world. My question to Sash and to Richard is, what are you doing with yourself this year with no real in-person conferences? And as a side note to that, how are you guys getting your feedback? There's so much great stuff that comes from seeing your clients and your users face to face at the booths at all the different events. How are you getting that same level of engagement in a year where everything's virtual?
Great question. Richard, I could start if you want me to. All right. Yeah. So absolutely is a great question, Carl. Without conferences going on live right now, we've done a lot of focus on webinars, live webcasts, and we've had an amazing amount of attendance from people. It's amazing to see these numbers literally skyrocket. And I think a big part of that is, again, there's more people working from home. I think they can dedicate or shift their schedules around a little bit to attend these webinars. So it's been a really great platform for us to continue to engage with our audience. And it's been nice to see who's attending. These are people that we get a lot of new people that come online, but we also see people that we like to see at conferences all the time. People we see at Built or AU or other conferences, or people we visit when we do our office visits, because Richard, myself, our director of software development, Glennis Patterson, and director of sales, Craig Dodge. And when we go around, to these conferences, we also like to go visit with customers as well. And so we see these familiar faces. So we've been very much staying engaged with our customers, through webinars. Richard and myself, and Glennis in particular as well, we are always constantly reaching out to our customers. And checking in on people to see how they're doing, and if they have any questions or in need of resources, we're definitely there to help out with that as well. So we've managed to continue to stay really busy. As Richard mentioned today, he had a presentation to a customer. I had one this morning as well, and our schedules have been pretty jam-packed with that. So even though the nature of how we're doing conferences or delivering content's changed a little bit, it's good to see that we're still heading in the right direction.
Sash was talking about being busy. This morning I got up at 5:30, and for those, a lot of people probably know me that I'm not the best morning person in the world, but there was a presentation I had to do to England today. So I had to be up early so I could present to England. And now at the end of the day here, I'm on the East Coast, I'm doing this podcast. So we'll see if I'm fading or if I'm making sense. But I think, as Sash said, we've been super busy over this time period, and I think for quite a number of years, we've had sort of a distributed team where we've been working at home. So it's not that much different for us, but definitely, like you said, visiting customers and going to these trade shows and built conferences, and that's something that we all look forward to. And I really, honestly, do miss that for the last couple months of not being able to travel as much and sort of be on the streets. In fact, my last travel experience was mid March, or actually early March. I was down in Dallas visiting some companies and some Ideate software firms, and I came back to Boston. I think it was on March 10th, and that's when everything started to shut down. And since then, I haven't obviously been on a plane or left the house basically since that time period. So it is really important to, as Sash was mentioning, to keep in contact with our customers and even prospects or people that are interested. And so we're really trying to do a lot more of these webinars and going to our individual customers and asking if we can do more presentations for them. And I think the beta program too, as I mentioned, again, doing these surveys of how are they using our solutions, how are they benefiting, is another way that we get communication. But I'll go on record and say there's nothing like face-to-face time with people at conferences, in their companies, in their firms. That's always wonderful. And I think that, we will get back to that at some day. But right now, we're doing the best we can with the technology.
I'll agree 100% with that. I was supposed to be getting ready to head to Australia for 2 weeks on Sunday for Built ANZ, so I'm definitely
Yep.
missing that journey. Maybe not the great big long flight, but the journey and the seeing people in person. The one sort of common thing that I'm noticing here is webinars. We're spending a lot of time doing that, and there was a huge uptick in people taking part. I'm just a little concerned that as we get more and more into that, when every day there's 15 different webinars or events like that people are going to start to get a little bit of overload. I'm just wondering what the next
Fatigue.
method of engagement might be before we get back to that live interaction.
Yeah, one of the things also, we've up until maybe about the time that the quarantine happened, around mid March, we were doing webinars and we weren't doing the cameras because we just thought it was a little bit of bandwidth and it was taking too much. And so that's one of the things that we've tried to do now is have the webcam on while we're doing the presentation to give that a little bit more of a personal touch to show people that we're real people behind the screen here. And I think that's people have appreciated that. They've commented that we're trying to be a little bit more personal as we give people information and we distribute sort of the technology and so forth. So beyond that, Carl, I know it's hard. I'm trying to think of other things off the top of my head that we could do in above and beyond additionally.
Well, and maybe there isn't something else. Maybe it's just little things like that. The personal touch of turning on the camera, asking questions to get engagement. Using platforms like Yortis University that uses YouTube Live, so there's always a live chat or comment, so that people are paying attention. I think that's really the key. You said, Richard, is just getting that engagement to understand that the people on the other end are in fact engaged.
Right.
And on that note, I guess we'll call it an episode because we're almost at 2 ovens. Carl, you got a final thought?
No.
Carl's out of words.
All right, I'm going to hit the stop then. We'll stop it on the note.
All right. Well, before you hit the stop, I just want to thank you very much for having both myself and Sash. And it's been a pleasure to be here and just really appreciate the opportunity to talk about Ideate software and our great solutions and some fun too.
And thank you, Ideate, for sponsoring BIM Thoughts this year.
And everything else.
And everything
We love
else
it.
you do.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, you guys. Really appreciate it.
BIM Thoughts bonus content.
I'll give you the short version. Actually, you know what I do is I weigh my coffee beans on a digital scale to get them exact. That way I get consistency, and then I keep them in these special airtight containers that kind of have plungers to make sure that there's no oxygen that gets in the beans, because that'll degrade the quality pretty quickly. And I use a burr grinder, and then I lately have been using a Chemex. It's doing a very large pour over, and I'll also weigh the water as well. So that way you get the consistency. And I use a kettle that has a digital thermometer, and it stops at about 202 degrees. It's low scientific, but I don't have an expensive. I would love to have a very expensive espresso machine, but that's not in the budget right now. So I'll generally do a French press or a pour over, but no coffee brewers, no Mr. Coffees or anything like that.